It was the last Saturday of October, and I'd driven out to that big thrift store on Cheshire Bridge because I needed a bookshelf and didn't feel like spending real money on one. Atlanta was still warm that week, the kind of warm where the leaves were turning, but the parking lot smelled like hot asphalt and somebody's leftover Popeyes. 78 degrees at 11 in the morning. Georgia does what it wants in October. Inside, the store had that specific thrift store smell. Old fabric, dust, a little cedar from somebody's donated blanket chest. The AC was cranked and the fluorescent lights buzzed in that low way you only notice after you've been standing there for 10 minutes. Somebody had a radio going near the register, playing a country station I didn't recognize. The bookshelves were in the back corner past the furniture. None of them were what I wanted. Too tall, too much of that yellowed 90s laminate. I gave up pretty quick and started wandering, which is what I actually go to those places for anyway. I ended up in the aisle where they keep the picture frames. You know the aisle. There's always one. Frames stacked on top of frames, most of them empty, some of them still holding the sample photo of the smiling white family from 2004 that came with them from Walmart. A couple of graduation pictures, somebody's baby that was probably in college now. And then there was this one frame. It was wood, dark, stained, maybe 8 by 10, the kind of frame that had once been nice and now had a chip on the top corner. I only picked it up because I liked the size. It was heavier than I expected. That's when I actually looked at the photo inside. It wasn't a sample photo, it was a real one. 8 people, a backyard somewhere. And by the light, I'd say early evening, late summer. There was a picnic table with a spread on it, one of those long, folding ones with the plastic cloth. I could see a cake. Somebody had one of those pointed birthday hats on, sitting a little crooked. An older man in a Braves cap had his arm around a woman who I guessed was his wife, and she was laughing so hard her eyes were closed. There was a kid, maybe 7, holding up a paper plate like she was showing it to the camera. 2 younger guys, brothers by the look of them, were leaning into each other and grinning. A teenage girl in a green hoodie was mid-word, saying something to the woman next to her. Everyone was laughing. All of them, even the kid. It was a good photo, not a professional one. Somebody had just taken it because everybody was happy at the same time, and they wanted to keep it. I stood there, holding it in the frame aisle of a thrift store on Cheshire Bridge Road, and I couldn't put it back on the shelf. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't scared. It wasn't creepy in any way you could point to. Nobody in the picture was doing anything strange. The photo wasn't old either. It looked like it could have been from 2015, maybe 2018. The kid's shirt had some cartoon on it I half recognized. But somebody had sold this. That's what got me. Not lost it, not left it in a hotel room. Somebody had taken the frame off a shelf or a wall, decided they didn't want it anymore, and dropped it into a donation bag with the old sweaters. And whoever sorted the donations at the store hadn't bothered to take the picture out. They just priced the frame at $4 with a little orange sticker and set it out. I started making up stories in my head. Maybe somebody died and their kids were cleaning out the house and they didn't recognize anyone in the photo, so it went in the box. Maybe it was a divorce. Maybe the family in the photo had a fight so bad that whoever owned the frame decided they never wanted to look at any of them again. Maybe there'd been a house fire and this was a copy that got sent to some cousin who never really cared. The truth is, you can invent 100 reasons, and none of them make it less strange to be standing in a thrift store holding a picture of somebody's grandmother laughing in a lawn chair. I flipped the frame over. On the back of the cardboard, there was nothing. No name, no date, no Mima's 71st, July 2016. Not even a smudge of pencil. Whoever had put the photo in the frame had never labeled it, and whoever sold it hadn't left anything either. I turned it back around. The teenage girl in the green hoodie kept saying whatever she was saying. The kid kept holding up her plate. The old man in the Braves cap kept smiling with his mouth a little open like he was in the middle of talking. An employee walked past pushing a cart of donated shoes. She didn't look at me. Somebody's phone rang 2 aisles over, and the guy answered it and started talking about a car battery. I put the frame in my basket. I didn't need a frame. I already had frames at home in a box in the closet. Empty ones that I'd never gotten around to using. I couldn't tell you what possessed me to keep it, except that if I walked out of that store and left it on the shelf, some other person was going to buy it in a week, take the picture out, and toss it in the trash, and put their dog in there instead. And that would be it. That would be the end of those 8 people. Not their real end, wherever they were, alive or not, but the end of that particular version of them, on that particular evening, laughing at the same time. I paid $4.86 with tax. The lady at the register looked at the photo through the glass for a second and said, "Cute family." I said, "Yeah." She put it in a plastic bag. I drove home the long way. I don't know why. I stopped at a Kroger for eggs and left the frame on the passenger seat. And when I came back out, I half expected it to be gone, which is a stupid thing to expect, but I looked anyway. At home, I put it on the kitchen table and sat down across from it with a beer. My apartment was quiet. The upstairs neighbor was walking around like she does every Saturday around 3. Somebody outside was starting a leaf blower, even though it was too early in the season for leaves in Atlanta. I looked at the 8 of them for a long time. I noticed things I hadn't noticed in the aisle. The woman with her eyes closed from laughing had a small cross around her neck. The teenage girl's hoodie said something on it, but I couldn't quite read it. Maybe a school name, maybe a band. One of the brothers was holding a beer, one of those tall boys, and it looked like a Miller. The kid had a Band-Aid on her knee. There was a dog in the very corner of the frame, mostly out of the shot, just its tail and one back leg. Somebody's dog. That was somebody's dog, and nobody was going to remember what its name was. In the background, on the fence behind the picnic table, there was a string of those cheap globe lights people hang up for parties. Somebody had spent a whole Saturday afternoon setting all that up because they wanted the evening to be nice. I got up and took the back off the frame. The photo came out easy. It was on regular photo paper, the kind you print at a CVS. I flipped it over, and I want to say I found something on the back. A name, a date, anything. There wasn't anything, just the little printer code in gray along the bottom edge, the way they come out of those machines. That was it. I got a pen. I thought about it for a while. I wrote, on the back, in small letters, "Someone remembers you." I don't know why I wrote it. I'm not religious. I don't think a piece of paper does anything for the people on it. But it felt wrong to just stick the picture in a drawer without saying something to it first, the way you might say something to a dead bird you find on the porch before you throw it out. I put the photo in the drawer of my desk, under the receipts and the old chargers. I put my own picture in the frame, one of me and my mom from a few Christmases ago that I'd been meaning to put up anyway. Set it on the shelf. It looked fine there. I don't take the photo out often. Every few months maybe, when I'm sitting at the desk and I remember it's in there. I open the drawer and I look at them for a minute, the 8 of them, still laughing, and I put it back. Here's the thing I keep coming back to though, not in a dramatic way, just as a thought. Somebody had that picture on their wall, or their fridge, or their mantle, or their nightstand. Somebody looked at those 8 people every day, or almost every day for however long, and then one day they stopped. And they packed up the house, and the picture went into a bag and into a truck and onto a shelf on Cheshire Bridge, and it sat there for who knows how long before I walked past. The teenage girl in the green hoodie is probably in her 20s now. The kid with the Band-Aid is probably in middle school. The old man in the Braves cap might not be around anymore. And none of them know that on a Saturday in October, a stranger in Atlanta bought their picture for $4 because she couldn't stand the idea of it going in the trash. That's all it is. That's the whole story. I didn't hear anything at night. Nothing moved. I don't dream about them. I just think, sometimes, about how easy it is to slide off the edge of somebody's life and end up on a shelf next to a bread machine. And I think about how the only thing that stops it really is somebody deciding not to let you. That's why the picture is still in the drawer. The clinic sits about 11 miles outside Poplarville, off a 2-lane that turns to gravel if you take the wrong fork. In April of 2018, I had been running it by myself for a little over 6 years, with one nurse, Loretta, in the room next to mine, and a receptionist who came in 3 days a week. It was not a busy practice. Some mornings I saw 4 people, some mornings I saw 2. That April had been all rain and thunder. The gravel on the last stretch was mostly clay by the time you got to the door. That Tuesday, my first appointment was a woman I will call Miss Odell. She was 78, on the books as a new patient, though she had lived in the county her whole life. Her chart had her weight, her blood pressure from a walk-in visit the year before, and one line under reason for visit that Loretta had typed for her over the phone. It says she has another voice inside her. I read that line twice before I opened the door. In this job, you get everything. Anxiety in a farmer's wife, early dementia in a woman who used to teach 4th grade, meth, grief. Some old man convinced his neighbor is stealing tomatoes through the fence. Another voice inside could be any of it. Usually the first thing you do is sit down and listen. Miss Odell was already in the chair when I came in. Small woman, thin cotton dress with tiny blue flowers on it. Hair set in that stiff Sunday way older women in the country still do. Her handbag was on her lap, and both her hands were on top of the handbag. She looked at me and smiled, and the smile was polite and a little tired, the way you smile at a stranger in the pharmacy line. I asked her how she was doing that morning. She said she was fine, thank you, and that her son had driven her over because she does not like the interstate. I asked what brought her in. She looked at the wall behind me for a second before she answered. "It ain't right," she said. "There's somebody in me that ain't me." I asked her when it started. She said maybe 2 months, maybe 3. I asked if it was more like her own thoughts running away from her, or more like hearing somebody else. She said the second one. I asked if she could hear it right then. She said no, it comes and goes, mostly at night, mostly when she is by herself. I asked if it ever told her to do things. She said only once, and only that she should get in the car and drive, and she did not. I went through the rest of the questions the way you go through them. Any medications, any recent falls, any history of anything like this in her family. She answered every one of them in that same tired, polite voice. Her hearing was fine. Her blood pressure was a little high, but nothing to write home about. Her son, she said, thought she needed to see somebody, but he did not want to be the one to say the word psychiatrist to his mother. I stood up to check her a little more thoroughly. I put the stethoscope on her back and listened to her breathe. I looked at her pupils. I asked her to squeeze my fingers. Everything you would do. Loretta was in the room next door, drawing blood from a diabetic teenager, and I could hear the teenager complaining about the needle through the wall. I sat back down on the little stool and started typing the note. I was mid-sentence when Miss Odell shifted in her chair. She did not move the way she had been moving. She sat up straight, both feet flat, and her shoulders rolled back like somebody had woken her up from behind. Her hands came off the handbag and rested on her knees, palms down. Her chin lifted about an inch. She did not blink, not once that I saw. Then she said my name. She did not say doctor. She did not say ma'am. She said the name I go by with my family, which is not the name on my badge and is not on my door and is not in a single chart in this building. She said it plainly, the way you say the name of somebody you have known for years. And her voice was not her voice. It was lower. Not a woman doing a scary man impression. Nothing theatrical about it. Just a man's voice coming out of a woman's throat. Calm, unhurried, like he had walked in and pulled up a chair. It had a small clip on the vowels that made me think of somebody who had grown up further north than Mississippi. He said the date my father died. Month, day, year. Then he said it again, slower, like he wanted to make sure I heard it. Then he asked me if I remembered where I was when the phone rang. I did not answer. I could not have if I wanted to. My hands were still on the keyboard, and I remember watching my own fingers and waiting for them to do something. Then Miss Odell exhaled, and her shoulders dropped, and her hands went back on top of the handbag. "It ain't right," she said. "I told you. There's somebody in me that ain't me." She was looking at the wall behind me again, same tired, polite voice as before. She did not remember what had just happened, or she was pretending she did not, and I have thought about that difference more than I would like to. I finished the appointment. I do not remember exactly what I said. I know I told her I was going to send her to somebody better set up to help with what she was describing. I know I wrote the referral to a psychiatric group in Hattiesburg. I know I typed the note the way you type it when you are trying not to think about the room you are sitting in. Auditory hallucinations. Patient reports intrusive voice. Several months duration. No evidence of acute psychosis. Referring for outpatient evaluation. I did not type anything about the date. I did not type the name she called me. I did not type that her voice had changed. Sitting there, I told myself I was going to write it up properly after she left. I did not. Loretta walked her out to the front, and I heard the little bell over the door. When Loretta came back, she leaned in my doorway with a chart in her hand and said, "You okay, Doc? You look like somebody just walked over your grave." I said I was fine. I said the coffee was hitting me wrong. She looked at me for another second, and then she went back down the hall. I saw 4 more patients that day. A sinus infection, a pre-op physical for a knee replacement, a 10-year-old boy with poison ivy up his forearm who cried the whole time. I do not remember the 4th one at all. I know she was a woman in her 40s, and I know I wrote her a prescription, and I know I signed my name at the bottom of the page. That is all I have of her. I drove home the way I always drive home. The road out to my house cuts through pine and past a couple of chicken farms, and the smell in April is honeysuckle and wet clay, and, if the wind is coming the wrong way, the chicken houses. I keep the windows up on the bad stretch. That evening, I remember rolling them down anyway and rolling them back up a quarter-mile later because I could not tell what I was smelling. I have driven that road in the dark and in fog, and once through the tail end of a tornado warning. That night I noticed the road. I did not call my mother until I had eaten something. I do not know why that mattered. It mattered. When I called her, I did not tell her about my day. I asked her what date Daddy died. I told her I was filling out a form for something at work. She said the date and she said the year, without pausing. My mother is 72 and her memory is not what it used to be, but that date she does not forget. It was the date. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone still warm in my hand, and I did not do anything for a while. I did not cry. I did not pray, and I was raised to. I just sat there and listened to the ice maker in the refrigerator drop a fresh tray, and then another one an hour later, and I realized I had not moved. For the next 3 weeks I did not sleep well, but not in a way I could point to. I saw my patients. I kept eating. I did the things you do. A little over 3 weeks in, I got a note in the inter-office mail from the psychiatrist in Hattiesburg. His name was on the letterhead, and it was a short paragraph, hand-signed at the bottom. He thanked me for the referral. He said he had seen Miss Odell twice. He said her presentation was consistent with a late-onset condition he wanted to treat with a low-dose antipsychotic, and that she was doing better already. He added one more sentence. He wrote it the way one doctor writes to another about an interesting case. Friendly, almost a joke between colleagues. He said she had, by the way, a phenomenal memory for stray details from other people's conversations, and that he would not be surprised if she had been picking up on things around my clinic for years. I read that sentence 4 or 5 times. I looked at the postmark. I put the letter in the drawer where I keep the paper things I do not throw out and do not file. It is still there. I never wrote him back. The mine has been closed for 50 years, and every night for 2 years now, I've heard men working in it. I take the shift from 10 to 6, 5 nights a week, at a boarded-up operation about 20 miles outside of Beckley, West Virginia. Not going to name the exact hollow. The company that used to own it went bust in the early 70s, and the property changed hands twice before the current owners. Some holding outfit in Delaware put up the fence and hired a security firm to keep kids and scrappers off the site. The mine's officially sealed. It's also officially unstable. 2 of the old shafts have collapsed in the last decade, and the whole hillside above the main portal is one bad storm away from coming down. That's why they still pay someone to sit in a trailer at the gate and walk the fence twice a shift. Insurance thing more than anything. I got the job in the summer of 2019. I was 32, had a bad back from framing houses, and a friend of mine named Cal told me his uncle ran the security company and needed a warm body. Pay wasn't much, but it was quiet, and I liked being outside at night. First few months, I read a lot on my phone, paperbacks in the trailer, whatever. The sounds started that first winter. I remember because it was cold enough that I was drinking coffee out of a Stanley thermos every hour, just to keep my hands warm. I was doing my 1 a.m. walk along the north fence when I heard it. A soft, metal-on-metal ping, then another, then a heavier one, dull, deeper, like someone hitting rock with a pick, coming from the direction of the main portal, which sits about 100 yards inside the fence, at the base of the hill. I froze and listened for a good 5 minutes. The sound had a rhythm to it. Ping, ping, thunk, pause. Ping, ping, thunk. Not random, not scrappers or animals. Someone was working down there. I called Cal's uncle on the radio. He came out with 2 of his guys and we walked the portal together. Chains still on, locks still on, concrete plug behind the gate, no cracks, nothing. The old man told me, "You'll hear that from time to time. Old timbers settling, the whole hill breathes." He was matter-of-fact about it. He'd worked security in coal country for 30 years. He wasn't spooked, so I decided not to be either. And after a while, I wasn't. The sounds came 4 or 5 nights a week, always between midnight and 3. Same rhythm, more or less. I stopped calling it in. I started reading through it. If I stood by the north fence and listened close, I could almost make out patterns, like a shift, bursts of work, then a rest, then more work. By the summer of 2021, I'd been on that gate almost 2 years. I knew every raccoon on that property by sight. I knew which section of fence sagged after a rain. I could tell you the exact minute the Norfolk Southern Freight passed on the ridge 4 miles south, because you'd feel it in the ground more than hear it. August. It was August when the singing started. The night I'm thinking of was a Wednesday, muggy, that thick, wet air you get in the mountains after a hot day, no wind at all. I'd done my midnight walk and was back at the trailer eating a gas station sandwich when I noticed the working sounds had changed pattern, faster, or not faster, just closer together. Ping, 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 thunk. Ping, 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 thunk. Almost like a drum. I stepped outside and stood on the little wooden porch the last guy built. That's when I heard the voices. At first, I thought it was the radio. I actually turned and looked at the radio through the trailer window. It was off. Then I thought maybe it was a car up on the county road, windows down, somebody's speakers. But the county road is over a mile away, and the trees swallow that kind of sound. The voices were coming from the portal. Several men, low, not shouting, not talking, singing, like a work song, in the way that men sing while their hands are busy and their minds are half somewhere else. I could hear the rise and fall of it, but not the words. Not yet. I want to be clear about what I did next, because looking back, it doesn't make total sense to me. I didn't call anyone. I didn't leave. I walked toward the portal. The gravel of the access road was loud under my boots, and I remember trying to step lighter. The floodlight on the east tower cast my shadow long and thin ahead of me. As I got closer to the fence line at the base of the hill, the singing got clearer. Still no words I could catch, but now there was a lead voice, older sounding, and behind him 3 or 4 other voices coming in on what I guess you'd call a chorus. I stopped about 10 feet from the inner fence, the one that rings the portal itself. I stood there with my hand on my flashlight, not turning it on, just listening. And then, all at once, I understood a line. Lay me down, where the black seam runs. Clear as if a man were standing right next to me, in an accent I couldn't place at first. Old, Appalachian, but heavier. More Scots-Irish in the vowels than anything you hear around here now. I took a step back. I don't think I meant to. My leg just did it. The picks kept going. The chorus came back around, and I caught more of it. Something about the boss's dollar and the mountain's bread. Then the lead voice again, and this time the line was different. Tell my woman I ain't scared. I stood there for what my watch said later was 11 minutes. I didn't move. My mouth was dry in a way I hadn't felt before. Not fear exactly, more like a shame. Like I was eavesdropping on something I had no right to hear. Then I did the thing that ended up mattering. I took my phone out of my pocket, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. I got about 4 minutes. The singing faded on its own around 1:40 a.m. The pics kept going another 20, then stopped. Then it was just crickets and the hum of the transformer on the East Pole. I didn't sleep the next day.
I've got a cousin, Dell, who teaches at a community college up near Morgantown. Not history exactly, but he knows a guy. That guy is a retired professor named Wyatt, who's been documenting the coal camps of southern West Virginia since the 70s. Wyatt has boxes of oral histories in his basement. Reel-to-reel, cassette, mini-disc. Dell called him for me, and I drove up on my Saturday off. Wyatt was maybe 75, wire glasses, dogs everywhere. He put on a pair of studio headphones and had me play the file through his desk speakers too, so we could both hear. He listened to the whole 4 minutes without saying anything. Then he asked me to play it again. The second time through, about halfway, he stopped the playback and just sat with his hand over his mouth. "Where did you record this?" he said. Not really a question the way he said it. I told him. He didn't answer for a minute. He got up, walked to a filing cabinet, pulled a folder. Inside were typewritten transcripts, some kind of interview from 1978 with an old man from the same county I work in. Wyatt slid one page across the desk and pointed to a stanza. lay me down where the black seam runs. Boss man's dollar don't buy back my sons. Mountain give the bread and the mountain take it home. Tell my woman I ain't scared to go alone. Word for word. Wyatt told me the song had a name in his archives, though I won't repeat it here because I don't want anyone Googling their way to that hollow. He said it was sung by a specific crew at a specific mine between about 1919 and the late 20s. He said only 3 recordings of it are known to exist, all from men in their 80s describing it from memory in the 60s. He said no clean audio of it has ever been captured, because by the time recording equipment was common in these hills, the men who sang it were already gone. He asked if he could keep a copy. I said yes. The company sent people out. They brought a geologist and 2 guys with acoustic equipment down from a university in Ohio. Spent a week on site. The geologist wrote something about resonance in the roof fractures, and how, under certain humidity, the hill can produce tones that sound structured. The acoustics people talked about echo chambers in the old rooms and pillars, and how sound from the county road might, in theory, funnel through vent shafts and come out shaped like speech. Careful language, lots of may and could. Nobody wanted to say anything about the words. I still work the gate. I need the money, and I'm not going to lie and say I've stopped listening. Most nights it's just the pics. That I've made my peace with. But every few weeks the singing comes back, and now that I know the words, I catch them without trying. The line I hate most is one that isn't in Wyatt's transcript. It shows up maybe once a month, at the very end, after the chorus fades. A single voice, quieter than the rest, saying, "New man on the gate tonight, boys. New man." I've been the only man on that gate for 2 years.